Today on I Am Rising, Resistance, the Silent Killer, Part 1. This has been a long time coming, and I've realized there's so much to share that there's no way that I'll be able to do it in just one episode. So consider this part 1 of why resistance is a silent killer. In fact, there is a form of suffering that most people don't realize that they're living in. And that suffering is called resistance. And this is what I'm seeing in clients and with clients over and over, that once we clear their resistance to the wholeness within their body, once we clear the resistance of what they think is right or wrong, once we clear the resistance to what they think is what they should do, magic can unfold, healing can happen. And so I'll get there. You probably heard a expression I've heard most of my life: what you resist persists. And like so many statements out there, like we hear it and we get it, but just getting it from some kind of concept, which most people don't even get to begin with, is not the same as a practiced embodiment of it. And so the other side of that statement, what you resist persists, is what you embrace, what you accept, what you meet, is then what resolves and dissolves. And we often don't hear that part of this, quote unquote statement. So this won't be surface level. This is going to be more of an embodied inner standing of resistance. And so how does resistance show up? Well, in the simplest of terms, it shows up as thinking that what is happening shouldn't be happening, right? And how often do we go through life like that? I mean, yes, when I heard those words 5 years ago, this is aggressive breast cancer, Tina. No, the human response isn't to just go, oh, yeah, I accept that. No, right? Our nervous system just knows it's in danger. It's shock. We stop breathing. I know I did. And yeah, there's how could this be happening? And so every day there are things unfolding, and our natural instinct and reflex is to go into resistance. How can this be happening? Why would this happen? All forms of resistance. Why? Because we don't want to feel it. We don't want to meet it. And what are we saying? We're saying, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. Boom. You're in resistance. When we go into resistance, what does that do to the body? Okay. Tightening. Stop breathing. So think of like all of a sudden fists. So obviously I've got my hands and fists right now, but inside the body, there is that tightening. There is bracing, contraction, right? We're contracting. We're cutting off, most of the time unconsciously, our breath, our emotions, and it's protective. So this isn't anyone's fault. This is just kind of a natural occurrence that happens within the nervous system. Why? Because your nervous system is trying to keep you safe. That's what it's designed to do. But what nobody ever tells us is that when the nervous system is trying to keep us safe, it isn't necessarily based on any true or a real truth of what's happening. In other words, the nervous system is protecting you from anything that is unfamiliar. And that's what it's deeming unsafe. And so this is where things get tricky. So your nervous system is always scanning. And if there is some kind of experience that mirrors something in your past where it's automatically going to shut down because of suppression, because of repression, all the times you didn't feel, then it just thinks that that's the natural thing to do. So it's trying to protect you, but it's not doing that. Maybe initially it protected you. But now this is why there's so much right now about nervous system regulation, because we're learning more and more about what's really happening inside. We're really learning how we can move through this resistance by meeting it, by, at least in this episode, naming it. Like, well, what is it? And anything that you're not embracing, you're resisting. Anything that you're not showing up and loving or accepting, you're rejecting or you're resisting. And this is why I love Byron Katie's work. She's known to say that she is a lover of reality. Now, can you honestly say, as you go through every day, that you are a lover of reality? I know that's my intention, but even I fall short. But the more that I practice, the more I get to know my body communicating and get to regulate my nervous system to breathe and keep meeting myself. I didn't know this prior, and so I'm going to tell you a story of deep resistance. And this might even have some triggers in it, and that's okay. I always love being the little poke or trigger, because then that means that something is opening for you if you're being triggered. God knows I was triggered back when this particular experience happened with cancer, because I was someone my whole life that said, I will never do chemo. I know about cancer as a business. I have watched the documentaries, The Truth About Cancer, and I follow a lot of people doing natural holistic methods. I've known about them because of clients. And I didn't know until my cancer journey that is a deep form of resistance. And it didn't help that the whole holistic community and spiritual community at that time was telling me, don't do chemo. The chemo will kill you. Like, all things that are based in truth, right? Very often when people die, they don't die from the cancer, they die from the treatments. Very often the toxic drugs. So yeah, we know that chemo is toxic. I knew about how much money Big Pharma makes by keeping people sick. And that's what made it so much more difficult. But the point is, so much of the people around me at that time, it felt like shaming. Don't go under the knife. That'll spread the cancer. All things, again, based in truth, okay? But these things, what happens is people grab onto these things. And what are we doing? We're grabbing, we're attaching all of a sudden, right? We're bracing, we're tightening. That is resistant. It's not open. It's not a flow. We'll get there. So anyway, yes, here I am being shamed. People not looking at my pathology, not seeing the extensive and incredibly high growth rate of this cancer in my body, which one integrative oncologist, and I highlight that because, yes, I'm very used to Western doctors, not all of them, but many, operating from fear. And so I would have assumed that a Western practitioner said this, but no, this was one of my two integrative oncologists that both started a practice in all of being naturopaths, that turned into becoming actual medical doctors and going into oncology because of so much of the holistic treatments not working. And I don't want to digress too much into all of this, but from the beginning, there was something deep within me that really felt that I was meant to be the bridge. Because do you know how hard it was to have this resistance, not knowing it was that at the time, and saying, no, I'm doing this the natural way. And then my integrative oncologist saying, this is a monster. So that's what he said. Then a different doctor that I had that was an expert in my type of breast cancer, that initially, because he was a Chinese herbalist, he was like, okay, no. He goes, my teas are like a natural chemo. And so originally he thought, okay, yeah, we can do this the natural way. And again, this was all because I was in such resistance. And then he saw the pathology and he said, this is a freight train. So all people, even within the holistic community, or at least business, but having a deeper knowledge of what I personally was up against. Now, this isn't the case for everyone. I'm just speaking of my case. But that made it so much more difficult because of that strong stance that I was in. That right there is resistance. The statement, I'll never do chemo. Yeah, it's a stance. It's an identity. It's attachment. It's closure because it's a conclusion. It's not open. So needless to say, and I've shared this in other podcast episodes, after I had a whole team of wonderful integrative oncologists as well as regular. It was my female integrative oncologist that I refer everybody to, Dr. Heidi Lucas in California, who said, okay, let's take a breath. She said, I will honor whatever your choice is, but I really wouldn't recommend only trying to go the natural route. I wouldn't call it a monster or a freight train. I'm sorry that was so extensive for you, but if you were my daughter, this is what I would say, or I asked her something like that. And having that nurturely presence and support that whatever I chose, she would honor. I was like, okay, I can do this. And so you can go back to another episode about my choice of chemo being a spiritual experience, because it was, but that's not what this is. That was my first clearing resistance to that it had to just be holistic. And this is where there could be triggering. I know quite a few people that chose the holistic route only, and they're dead. I know people that chose the holistic route and are living. However, because I've been immersed in this all too often, it's not necessarily the one or the other, because there's so many factors. There's the person's body and their immune system. There's the type of cancer and where it is. There's the growth rate of the cancer. So all of those factors need to be taken into account. So it is very irresponsible to say to someone, you don't need the surgery, you don't need the chemo. And unfortunately, a big part of the holistic community does that, and they still do. And I can't judge it because that was me. But I can raise awareness to it now, being on the other side of it. So I cleared my resistance to it. I embraced the whole experience. And I was the bridge. I did conventional treatment alongside supplements, Chinese teas, these prescription teas. So I was always being held by both sides, and then never making a choice from fear, but honoring my personal journey each and every moment. So some could say choosing chemo saved my life, or just having all of my whole team and myself around every aspect of my healing, never just doing it because someone said to do it, but doing the research, not resisting reality. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but so worth it because I'm here. So yes, I chose both. I reclaimed my power and was able to get my body into a space of feeling safe, because that's the other thing here with resistance, is that resistance is usually the body not feeling safe, right? And resistance will then, because the body doesn't feel safe, close and then create this suffering. And we stay in that kind of fight or flight or tension or overdrive, which is why it's so important to have a practice of softening, of being with what's here, of being willing to be in a space that's uncomfortable, so that there's embracing and a loving on some level of the reality that we're in, even if simultaneously you hate it. And that's where I always say in my programs, it's both and, it's not either or. Can you be with the tension, the resistance, the anger, because you wanted it to be your way, but then soften and open to, is there another way of seeing this? Is there a higher way of being with this in the midst of everything within me that wants to fight? So let's talk about that right now, fighting. There's this slogan all across the world, right? Fighting cancer. To fight anything, you're resisting. And I'm not saying that's not good to have that kind of energy, but if you're fighting, you're against something. If you're against something, you're resisting. If you're resisting, that is what is causing havoc inside. That is what is dysregulating your nervous system. That is what is keeping dis-ease, dysfunction inside. Because that means there's a fight inside. And again, this is where it gets tricky. However, I am a testimony and a testament to true healing, not by bypassing, not by resisting, but becoming more and more aware and breathing into the most scariest of places, the most extreme of symptoms. So fighting, saying I'll never do, having these strong opinions creates a closure of your system and it hardens you. And the moment that we harden, we stop listening. We stop flow. We constrict and then create more resistance on the inside. And we want to invite awareness in, right? We want to notice the body, notice the contraction, soften and breathe into it. Not fix it, not change it, not fight it. And this may be a very new way of being. Because I could almost hear people listening to this being like, no, I need to fight the cancer. We need to fight this disease. And I get it on one level. But I'll also tell you, you will never truly heal, like truly heal and live and embody the true health and wealth and grace and beauty if you're in a state of fighting. Because what's really happening underneath all of this resistance is the true healing power, is the ancient wisdom within a body that already knows how to heal, is the true essence of radiance and power and light that is who and what you really are, that has armor and layers of protection, because that's the fight. That's what the nervous system learned. And your true healing in essence is underneath it all. Fighting, resisting, keeps it there. Softening, embracing, getting curious, breathing into it is what allows the energy to move. Meeting ourselves there, uncovering, discovering the old lies and belief systems, the old patterns that are in the subconscious that have been running rampant, that have become part of the disease, because it's all the suppression throughout your lifetime. Nobody's fault, but the suppression of feeling what is and embracing what's here that has caused all of that quote unquote darkness or frozen, stuck, compressed energy that your energy has been going towards and then keeping dis-ease alive. When we clear that resistance, when we embrace and start to reconnect to these former versions of ourselves on the inside that are just looking for our love, that are just looking for our attention, That's that meeting ourselves moment by moment. That is when true healing begins to open up. And this is why there are people that have stage 4 cancers, terminal diagnoses, and they have this radical remission. In fact, there's a book called Radical Remission that have these spontaneous healings. Anita Morjani is one who has a most amazing story. And there are many others like her who, when you look at what the true healing ended up being, it wasn't just the conventional treatments or surgeries. They had exhausted all of that. And then they went into heart healing, forgiveness, reconnecting, breath and presence, and all the mind body principles that I now teach and that I now work with clients on, because I'm seeing also that this is where true healing is. It's not the medicine that's part of it. It's not the surgeries that might be part of it. It's not just the holistic treatments. Those are all parts of it. But what is truly missing, if you're just checking all the boxes and taking the right supplements and doing the right treatments, what's missing is you, because that was also part of my journey. I was missing from my system. Cancer became the most amazing catalyst. It was an initiation for me into a higher way of being. And no, it wasn't like that in the beginning. So I say this with compassion for anyone at the beginning stages that might be really in the humanness of this. And I honor that. But you are calling to you inside. In fact, if you have a cancer diagnosis or any disease, even autoimmune, the you on the inside is screaming. It's been whispering for a while, then it started to shout. And once it is in the physical, it is screaming because somewhere along the way, you left yourself behind. You abandoned yourself. You closed. It's nobody's fault. But all of this closure and all of this resistance is keeping you from a life that you came here to live. And you don't even have to believe all of this. If you are willing to practice softening and breathing, if you are willing to meet yourself moment by moment on the inside and really soften and open and go through probably things that are uncomfortable, your willingness is actually enough. The other thing I want to share that's very close to my heart, because it's happening now, is I have a client that I've been working with for about 6 months. And she had a slower growing cancer. She had 3 tumors in her breast. And while we were initially started with some one-on-one, and then she did my 3-month program that we're ending right now, or in the 3rd month, Mind Body Mastery. So we started working one-on-one together, and she had a very slow growing cancer. And so she really wanted to do it the holistic way. And I supported her all along the while, letting her know about kind of being the bridge, but we were still, just carefully navigating what was going to be best for her, because that's first and foremost. I get out of the way. I'm just there to really assist in the highest way that I can. And as we were working for a few months together, she went to this one particular surgeon, and her surgeon said, whatever you're doing, it's a failure, because these tumors are not, they didn't get bigger. They stayed the same, but they didn't diminish. And she took that as a plus. And I just didn't like that any surgeon would say, whatever you're doing is a failure. But this is the stuff that happens. I've witnessed things like this myself. And what I love about this beautiful woman is she didn't even let that bother her. She's like, it's not a failure. They haven't gotten bigger. And we continued to do the deeper work. And we started to explore, is she resisting conventional treatment? And she didn't think so at first. But then the more that we dropped into what we do in my program, she was like, wow, maybe I am. And so she decided to make some appointments with surgeons to just explore her options and maybe what kind of surgery was going to be best for her, because with a slow growing cancer, there wasn't a need really for any kind of chemo or anything else. She made the appointments. And then, as she was gathering all of her stuff together, she went back to this one surgeon that had said that it was a failure, to just kind of get all of the work set up to bring with her in her traveling, because she was going to be traveling to do this. And the surgeon said, I can't find 2 of your tumors, and the third one is smaller. Take a deep breath with me on that. I do not take credit. Her body, her willingness, her courage, her breath, her presence, this deeper work that her and I have been immersed in personally and through the program is what did this. She let go of her resistance and her body came online. Now, is that going to be everyone's story? Not necessarily. Everyone's healing is different. But if you are fighting disease, if you are fighting yourself, which a lot of times is autoimmune, you don't even realize there is this fighting within. Nothing can move when you're fighting. When we stop fighting, that energy can finally move. So I ask you, as we come almost close to an end here, where in your life are you saying no to what is? And as I say that, what comes up? Do you notice any kind of contraction in the body? Is there anything significant that is arising? Where in my life am I resisting? Am I reacting? Am I creating conclusions when I'm being asked to stay curious, to be in the question, to embrace what is as a messenger? Every moment the body is communicating through emotions, through thoughts. And we get to get curious. What is really happening here? What am I being asked of in this moment, as everything in me wants to fight? And I can just get curious and get to know these sensations and start to drop into feel in ways that I haven't, and trust my body in breath and create a new relationship with my body and with the former versions of me, so that I can form that safety, so that I can let my nervous system, my body, the little ones inside know I'm not back in the past where those identities were created, where those protection mechanisms and coping mechanisms started. This is a new moment. And then this holy instant, as we say in A Course in Miracles, in this new moment, as I breathe in presence, as I soften and open to a higher way of seeing, and realizing that all of this is a lesson for me to learn more about how to embrace all of me with unconditional love and compassion, and forgive myself and others for not knowing up until now. Where am I fighting? And can I just soften, invite a new awareness in? And I invite you today to soften into something, even just a few percent more. Because even that little willingness to open, to stop saying this shouldn't be happening and I don't want to feel this, but I'm willing to be here in this experience. I don't like it. Everything in me wants to react and fight. But I soften my shoulders. I relax my belly. I breathe down deep into my pelvis. I allow my heart to open, to begin this new relationship, to begin to embrace all of me, to reconnect and reclaim these lost parts that I abandoned when I stopped feeling, that I left behind when I closed. And now I get to reconnect and reunify and repair using my breath, my willingness, my heart, being willing to feel. This is what true healing is. A dysregulated nervous system that's in resistance cannot heal. Period. The end. So what are you willing today, even just a little bit, to embrace? This is part 1 of Resistance, the Silent Killer. Because I know with every fiber of my being that if more people were embracing who they are rather than resisting, more people would have these spontaneous healings, would be really restoring themselves to the wholeness of who they are, and they would have that access to the ancient wisdom within. It's not an easy path at all. It is not for the faint of heart, because you have to be courageous enough to feel, to meet parts of yourself that may be uncomfortable, but it is so worth it. And so if any of this feels aligned, this is what I do on a daily basis, one-on-one, but in my programs. We'll have another mind, body, breath mastery in the fall. And this next container is more of a women's embodiment circle, but with a lot of one-on-one and group mentoring. And it will go deep into reclaiming your voice, your power, your health, whatever it is that's going to help you access the sovereignty, the beauty, the love, because that's actually your natural state of being. I invite you, if you feel the call, I send you so much love. Take care.